Well, welcome to the Chancellor's Forum. We're glad you're all here. Strategic planning is a very exciting topic. And we're pleased to have this time with everyone to talk about the ideas that are emerging from the plan. And we certainly will provide a lot of opportunities for feedback. This is part of the continued effort to receive response to the task force reports that have all been posted on the web. We've had a number of meetings since then, and the steering committee is busy finalizing plans from those submitted. Also, I think it's very clear that we've got a lot of issues on our plate. I've talked a lot in the last week or so about the budget challenges facing the state of North Carolina, and North Carolina is not alone in this. In fact, there's a long list of states across the nation that are experiencing some of the largest budget deficits in many, many, many years. So we want to do everything we can to ensure the strength of this university going forward by being strategic in our thinking. That's why, you know, a lot of people have said to me, Chancellor, why do a strategic plan when there's no resources? Well, frankly, that's when it's most critical to think strategically, because when you have to make critical decisions about how to keep the university strong going forward, you need clearly defined priorities and strategies, and that's what this is about. With regard to budget, I know that most of you it's the most popular YouTube video around. I think you've heard the message from the Chancellor. We've got a lot of activity right now looking at the issues that were outlined in that, with a goal of trying to get some early recommendations submitted to my office by mid-March. And I've outlined in those comments the core principles under which any budget reductions that we have to take as a university would be, we'd abide by, and first and foremost is protecting the academic strength of this institution and assuring that we're doing everything possible to help our students be successful and preparing them for the workforce. And second principle, I've said many times, is we've got to have a strong faculty to be an outstanding university to accomplish goal one, to protect our students. And goal three, you all know, we are a world-class research institution. That's important for North Carolina. We want to be the economic engine that brings this state out of the current recession. We believe we are, and so we want to protect the strength of our research core. We also have a campus that is extremely well maintained, and a campus, although we do have deferred maintenance, Charlie Leffler would be quick to tell you, and I'm looking at a few department heads that would also be quick to tell you, David Threadgill. But we have a great campus, and we have a campus that we work hard to ensure the safety of our students and the productivity of our faculty and staff, and we want to continue that. Finally, we want to do everything we can to make sure NC State remains one of the best values in higher education, not just by the quality of the education we provide, but by the affordability of that education. And we're proud, along with our colleagues at Chapel Hill, to always be on Kiplinger's list of best buys and also best returns on investment. So we are in the midst of strategic planning, and we are there because it's important for us to be there, particularly in an environment when we're trying to protect the core of this university. And as we go through the conversation, Provost Arden and Dr. Overton will provide a leadership to the discussion on where we are with planning, and then we'll certainly want to do everything we can to answer questions as we now know the answers to those related to the budget going forward. So with that, I'll bring Provost Arden up.
Thank you, Chancellor. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for coming out this afternoon. This is a great turnout to have a campus-wide discussion on some of the many, many issues that are important to us, one of which is strategic planning. I'm sure there are a number of other closely related issues that are on your mind today. We've got a few slides as a quick overview to begin the discussion. And then I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Overton, to come up front with me, and we're going to direct the discussion. We wanted to remind you what the task forces were. There are 9 task forces that were formed at the beginning of last fall. There are undergraduate student success, graduate and postdoctoral program development, faculty excellence, research and scholarship, comprehensiveness and interdisciplinarity, global engagement and competitiveness, partnership, innovation, entrepreneurship, campus culture and community, and resource strategies. Now, I can tell you the task forces have been working extremely hard, particularly over the fall. We've had 160 faculty members, students, and staff working on those task forces. Everybody's put a lot of work into those. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at and review the white papers that were put up earlier this week. We've still got a fair bit of work to do in terms of drawing the essential elements out of those task force reports and weaving them into a coherent and concise strategic plan. That is what is going on at the moment. But at this stage, it is critically important for us to get your input on the thoughts that have been put forward to date on each of those issues. Just going back very quickly and giving you a timeline of where we are and where we've been. We began last summer. During the fall, the task forces were at work, as I've said, met with multiple different internal constituents and external stakeholders as they formed the task force reports. During December, the task forces presented their reports to the Strategic Planning Committee. We have several extensive discussions in the latter part of December. The Strategic Planning Committee begins to identify key ideas in late December and key themes which would advise the formation of the strategic plan. Here we are in January. The Strategic Planning Committee has been working on beginning a draft strategic plan. The task force has submitted their final white papers, and they were posted online on January 21st. Here we are today at the Chancellor's Forum. Throughout February, we had hoped to have a draft of the strategic plan by very early in February. It's now going to be probably more middle to third week of February as we move through this process. So the February-March time period is going to be very, very critical. Receiving your input here today, continuing to receive your input directly and over our website, and then for you to have a look at the draft strategic plan during March, the latter part of February and March. Give us your feedback so that we can modify that again before we deliver it to the Chancellor, incorporate his input, and then hopefully have it to the Board of Trustees by April. Remember that today's forum is just one of several opportunities for input and comment. We've had multiple forums before. There is the website to go to give your continued input. And of course, Marjorie, I, and the task force chairs are always open to further input via email or direct comment. And we do generally welcome and appreciate that feedback and commentary. With that, I'm going to ask Marjorie. You want to stay seated or come up, Marjorie? Yes, of course I need your help. And I think we're just going to try and do this fairly informally, but so that everybody can be heard, I am going to ask that if you have a question to come up to one of these 3 microphones so that everybody can hear your questions. And then most of the questions that we have, if they're specific to a specific area of a task force report, I'm going to direct them to the task force chairs to respond to. And could the task force chairs, which are mostly seated up front here, please stand up and wave. Everybody, I'm not going to go through and name the task force chairs for each task force, but one back there, okay. And then if there are general questions related to budget or otherwise that relate more generally to issues at the university, Charlie Leffler, our Vice Chancellor of Business and Finance, is here, along with the Chancellor and myself, to respond to those. But the focus of today is the task force reports. It is the strategic plan. We need your input, so we're going to try and keep the focus as much as possible on that. All right, questions. Let's start. If you have a question, please come forward to one of the microphones.
I've never been known to be shy. David Zonderman, I'm the Associate Department Head in History. Just 2 observations, and if you want to respond, that's fine. But the first is, I absolutely agree with what the Chancellor said about now more than ever, we're facing challenges we haven't seen since the Great Depression. We do need to think strategically. I would urge you, when we think about the strengths of this university, the strengths are not just our so-called historic strengths, which lie in engineering and agriculture, but of course we truly are a comprehensive university now. And I think we really have to always acknowledge that virtually across the campus there are some tremendous strengths. And obviously I speak somewhat for the humanities and the social sciences on that. The second point I would make is I actually did go through all the white papers. And I'm really intrigued by there seems to be a lot of synergy from about 4 or 5 of the reports about developing kind of focus areas, especially in research and graduate education. And I guess my comment on that is I very much, as a researcher, I think there's some tremendously exciting ideas in that. As someone who also does graduate education, I'm a little concerned that we need to think a little more, to put it crudely, about how the market functions. I mean, the example I'll make is several of these reports talk about perhaps developing a doctorate in humanities. While that sounds interesting, given the cruel job market right now, I don't know where a doctorate in humanities would find employment if that man or woman particularly wanted a job in the academy. So I would urge, if that idea is going forward, especially in the graduate education side, I would urge that the committee look more closely at sort of current and potentially future employment patterns, because I worry we could end up with a sort of what looks like an intellectually exciting degree that no one can get a job with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. There were, as you've mentioned, a lot of comments throughout the task forces that had common themes. One was developing focal areas for the university, prioritized focal areas. Another related set of comments related to developing graduate areas of study, more interdisciplinary graduate areas of study. Do any of our task force chairs want to comment on either of those areas?
So I'm Barb Sherry, co-chair of the graduate and postdoctoral. I'm Barb Sherry. I'm co-chair of the graduate and postdoctoral program development task force. I just want to say that we were very aware that one size does not fit all. We were not proposing that there would be something that would go across all of the different graduate programs at the university. And some people might be surprised to hear that some of the science disciplines were also concerned about losing the name and the specificity of their doctoral degree. So we're thinking that for some programs, life sciences, for example, this might work very well. For other programs, it would not. So we welcome the feedback.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, Provost. I have a question mainly for you or perhaps the Chancellor. A number of times recently, in recent days, I've heard reference to closing down programs, closing down departments, maybe low-enrolled small departments. And I wondered specifically what you each have in mind regarding the faculty members in those departments.
He just threw it right back to me.
It's only through my eyes.
No, I think if you look at the, and just to be clear here for a moment, we have 3 interrelated processes going on. We have a strategic planning process, which is really geared towards long-term planning, 5 to 8 years for this university. It is not blind to, but is not geared purely to getting us from this budget year to the next year. And that is really critical for us, for a university, to have that kind of vision and plan. We have a usual annual budgetary process that we go through, which is proving a little more problematic this year than most years, but not extreme by some standards around the country. And then most recently, of course, the Chancellor has asked the Vice Chancellor for Business, Finance, and myself to focus on looking at overall strategies to increase efficiency and effectiveness within the university. Under that, one of those is to do a review of low-enrolled programs, low-enrolled courses, and see if there's anything there where there are efficiencies that could be gained. If we were to act on those, they wouldn't be unilateral actions. They would certainly involve discussion and faculty and develop a plan to move forward. At this point in time, we're simply going back and looking at the data and reviewing those programs. With respect to elimination of whole programs, as you're discussing, and larger units and the role of faculty, there is not at the moment a discussion within the UNC system, and this would be a system-wide discussion, not a university or campus discussion, about release of faculty, tenured faculty, contract faculty, or otherwise. That is not a discussion that has gone in any great direction at this point in time, and is highly unlikely to be something that would happen over the next several months. So what we're really focused on at the moment are efficiencies that could be gained by either potential elimination of some low-enrolled courses and academic programs, or alternately, efficiencies that could be gained by combining programs or even administrative units. And we're really not focused on displacing faculty or contract faculty who are in occupied positions at this point in time. Many of the efficiencies that would be gained over a prolonged period with some of those kinds of organizational or structural changes, but we have to think about their implementation now. Now is the right time to begin thinking about their implementation. Okay, come on, this can't be it.
Piggybacking onto that question from the staff side, there have been talks of kind of a centralization of the business functions and service centers. What would that look like for departmental and college staff who currently are in those functions, and what kind of feedback would you guys welcome, or what kind of process would be involved in making those decisions?
Another point that the Chancellor asked to look at is whether or not there can be efficiencies gained within our system by looking at the way we provide some of our business functions, HR functions at the moment. We're very, very early on in that process. And so actually probably the best is if I ask the Vice Chancellor for Business and Finance. Was that a nice pass? Comment.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. There are a number of campuses across the country that some of you may be familiar with that have looked at these kind of processes, these kind of streamlining of service centers, typically called shared service centers in this regard. And I think we've got a lot yet to learn about how to apply it here at NC State. How might it make a difference here? And that's what we're really going to be trying to do as part of this presentation to the Chancellor in March. So we have a lot left to sort through in terms of what we've seen out there and how it might apply to NC State. But I think what we have said and what the Provost said this morning just to the deans was, as you think about how we'll deal with potentially a 15% budget reduction, what might we be doing inside of our units right now or in collaboration with others? There's nothing that keeps us from taking those steps right now, and they should be part of our thinking in terms of the 15% plan. And we're certainly going to be looking at that when those plans are submitted here at the end of this month, just next Monday, in terms of what is already on the minds in terms of ideas that are coming out of the campus as we look at this model across the entire campus. And that will, no question, influence how we think about that and how we suggest something forward to the Chancellor. Did that get to your question? Okay. Back to you, sir.
Okay, more questions.
Hi, Chris Gould. There are many interesting suggestions in the Student Success Task Force. I wonder if you or they could comment on how broadly applicable they would be to basically the whole of the campus, and over what kind of time frame one could sort of see an impact on that in terms of success rates, time to degree, so forth. So I don't know if that's a comment for you or anybody from the task force.
I'll start out and then once again very quickly punt it. Yeah, this issue of student success is absolutely critical. We have held several forums and discussions on this. As an institution, we do okay, but we're not where we want to be. We can do better. And that's why such a critical part of this discussion is how are we going to focus our limited resources, which are likely to become even more limited as we move forward, on ensuring the success of our students. I think this particular task force, all of our task force did a great job. This task force really outlined a schematic for how we would impact on students, both as they first enter the university and in the latter parts of their career, to optimize success. So it was one of our task force chairs on student success. I'm looking directly at Joanne. She knows that. Would like to comment further on that?
Given that Chris eats with me every day, it's interesting that he would come up with that question today here. If you look at our 5 recommendations, and I'll talk about them one by one, the first is on Summer Start, which is a program for incoming students that we started last year. It was incredibly successful. We're expanding that this year. So I expect that there will be an expansion of that as we continue on. The highest priority for us was this new advising model, where we have proposed that there would be professional advisors for our incoming students that would be hired in the departments and in the colleges in which the students reside, who would be trained in these cross-curricular issues across campus and would be working closely with the faculty to help students best quickly identify their best career fit and their best academic fit. There are professional advisors across campus, so DUOP certainly has some professional advisors, but so do other colleges. CALS has some, CHAS has some, PAMS have some, they're scattered. So although we've proposed a 120-to-1 advising model, we already have a lot of these folks. So I would hope that when resources become available, that that's really the first place that we start putting in additional resources. We proposed an expansion of the first year inquiry program, and if you're aware of this program, these are courses that are small courses, help students to quickly connect to peers and to faculty in the critical first year. These courses help students to develop their critical thinking skills and their communication skills, and currently about 10% of our incoming students take a first year inquiry course. So we propose that that figure be 100%, and we know that will take some time. We proposed a funding model. Again, there are lots of funding models, but we were hoping to get that up and running at full capacity in about 5 or so years. We talked about the living and learning communities. So currently we have 9 living and learning communities on campus. About 75 to 80% of our incoming students live in residence halls, and about 25% of our incoming students live in the living and learning communities. And if you read the report, you'll see some data on the success these communities have on retention rates and on academic performance. So we propose to go from that 25% of all incoming students in living and learning communities to 50% through the development of 3 to 4 new communities, and through the expansion of existing communities as appropriate. So we gave the Chancellor and the Provost our first step, which is to renew efforts to establish an environmental living and learning community. So again, that's something that can be phased in across the years. And the last recommendation was on high impact educational practices, and we propose that we really do establish a requirement that all students have one of 5 experiences: a study abroad experience, a service learning experience, a capstone experience, an undergraduate research experience, and an internship or a co-op. So that's something that I would hope that we would be putting resources into undergraduate research and service learning and the other categories so that we can, given budget considerations, implement that within the next 5 or 6 years.
Thanks, Joanne. And I do want to illustrate that that's an excellent example of where the strategic planning process and the process that the Chancellor has asked us to undertake really interdigitate or fit together. It's very clear when you look at the numbers. Our 6-year graduation rate of our undergraduates at the moment is about 71%. It's very, very clear when you look at the data and ask the questions, why do our students not graduate in a timely fashion, or why do they leave altogether, that there are different reasons for different campuses, but in general, the non-academic reasons are just as important as the academic reasons. So when we then step back and look at it from a structural perspective or an organizational perspective, all the greater reason that we really have to look at harmonizing our academic programs and our student support programs. And so we are looking at structural changes that will lead to greater interactions between those programs. We do have at the moment multiple duplicative programs on the academic and non-academic side of the house, all geared towards assisting and helping our students. But we sometimes have to step back and say, how can we integrate these? Yes, there may be some cost savings, but more importantly, how can we deliver these support services, both academic and non-academics, to our students in a more effective manner? I think that's a really good example of how these processes fit together.
I'm Becky Rufty with the Graduate School, and I would be remiss if I didn't say in public what I've said to you and to the Chancellor in private, and that is that this particular task force, understandably so, has focused on undergraduate student success. I think that the university needs to look at graduate student success just as much as undergraduate student success. The completion rate for doctoral students at NC State is 60%, and the cost of doctoral education is exorbitant. And if we're going to be a prominent research extensive or very research extensive university, we have to do better in terms of doctoral completion, doctoral student placement. So as you move forward, I hope that the conversation will also include graduate students. Thank you.
That's an excellent point, Becky. A lot of the time when we talk about completion rates and graduation rates, we are talking about undergraduates. As Becky says, across the university, our completion rates in doctoral programs are about 60%. It actually varies from program to program, from about 30%, low 30%, up to around 90%. And if you want to talk about effectiveness and efficiency and effective utilization of resources, to have a doctoral student in a program for 3 or 4 or 5 years on our limited graduate student support plan dollars and not graduate is a major issue both for the individual and for the university. So thanks for bringing that up. Does anybody from the Graduate Student Task Force want to comment further?
I'm Mary Tetro. I work in the Office of Advising Support Information Services. And as Dr. Cohn was talking about the primary focuses that are going to support undergraduate education, she started with the Summer SMART program. My understanding that one of the huge benefits of that program was the extensive tutorial support that was a part of it, and then which is critical to success. So if we're going to add professional advisors within the colleges, I personally would like to see more in the what I would call the consolidated place of advising. But if you're going to add advisors, I would hope that we also consider increasing the tutorial support system to the entire undergraduate campus, because good advising is only one part of the success that was a part of the START program, and all students need additional tutorial support in many areas, especially since we've lost all that. I believe we aren't supporting it anymore, excuse me, in the foreign languages. So not that that's a critical place, but I think that tutorial support for undergraduates has to go hand in hand with academic advising. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That's an excellent point. President Ross, when he visited the campus the other day, asked specifically what had been the budgetary impacts on our tutorial and advising programs. And so we're keenly aware that those programs are going to be integral to student success as we move forward. So we're going to be challenged on the financial front in the next couple of years, but that is an issue that we really have to pay attention to and make sure that we focus the resources that we have available to that end. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbie Honeycutt with the Graduate School, and I just have one comment for you to think about. There's a population here on campus that exists, and we are EPA professionals who are not faculty, we're not tenure track, we're not tenure track, and we're not staff. So we're a group that's sort of missing, and I didn't see us mentioned anywhere in any of the reports. I think I saw one paper that mentioned EPA, but I just want to challenge you and the Chancellor and the task force to really think about what we can bring to the institution in terms of our skills and expertise and experience. For example, I hold a PhD, and I am in the position in the graduate school to do research that crosses across all disciplines, and I already engage in that with several graduate students who then turn around and offer services to the campus. And so if you're looking at interdisciplinary programs and you're looking for resources that already exist here, you might want to tap into the EPA staff here. I don't know what to call this, EPA professionals who are not associated with faculty or staff, because we could bring a lot to the table if we were to convene in some way. And you mentioned that a little earlier, and I did talk with our colleagues at UNC Chapel Hill to see what movements they were making in this area, and I think we could bring a lot to the table. So just want to thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate that. You know, the non-faculty EPA on this campus contribute in huge ways to both our instructional research and our engagement missions. We have almost 2,000 non-faculty EPA on campus, and they are an integral part of our mission. So thank you for reminding us and bringing that to our attention.
Hello, I'm Agustin Pastem from Foreign Languages Department. Picking up or going back to someone made a point about graduate education, and I was just wondering, in this at this moment of very harsh economic, we're in dire straits. What's happening with the PhD in Hispanic Studies? Are you still going for it? Is it going to remain stagnant, or is there still interest among the upper echelons for the Constitution and the final implementation of the program?
You know, I can't speak extensively to the PhD in Hispanic Studies other than what I will tell you is that, you know, we have a couple of additional doctoral programs in the pipeline, and it has been very, very difficult over the last several years in getting new academic programs, and specifically new doctoral programs, through GA approval. One that is currently approved for planning is our PhD in Public History. Another that has been approved at the local campus level, but has not yet gone to disciplinary panel, is the PhD in Sociolinguistics. The PhD in Hispanic Studies is not progressed to that level. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Will it progress, or will it remain?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that there is going to be tremendous scrutiny across the University of North Carolina system on new academic degree programs. That is not going to change. And in fact, President Ross has asked our former Chancellor Jim Woodward to do a review of potentially overlapping or duplicative programs throughout the system. So I honestly can't tell you that we're going to put forward or successfully put forward a lot of new doctoral programs in any specific discipline in the short term. I think because of the budgetary challenges, because of the tremendous scrutiny that there's going to be on potentially duplicative programs and new programs in general, I think that you're going to find that we're going to have to really give this a lot of scrutiny and a lot of prioritization as we go forward over the next several years. So I know I didn't answer your question specifically, other than to say I would think that the likelihood of 3 approved doctoral programs going forward in the humanities and social sciences in the next several years is not high. I think there's going to be tremendous scrutiny of those programs. And I think it would behoove us as an institution to make sure that we step back and that we think critically about, first of all, the programs that we do have, and secondly, the prioritization of the way we put programs forward and how they either complement, overlap, or interact with other programs across the UNC system. I think we're going to have to pay far more attention to that as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm Mary Tetro again. I have been an academic advisor since 1984 in a position as an EPA professional and an instructor. And so I absolutely identify and support what Dr. Honeycutt was saying with regard to the EPA staff. And as I looked at the success 5 points that Dr. Cohen's group made, I've looked and realized that, and trust me, I respect the faculty with every bone in my body, and I've served on the faculty senate. However, I am an EPA professional, and each of these units, if you look at them, if you add professional advisors to the colleges, it's going to be an EPA position for the most part. Currently, 3 out of the 5 bullet points for the additional high-impact practices come out of places that are staffed with EPA professionals. The tutorial center is an EPA professional. The START program was supported by EPA professionals. First year living and learning communities in the residence life is staffed and supported a lot by EPA professionals. So my point is actually funding. and salaries. Because if you look across the board at the individuals who serve in those positions, the salaries vary greatly, both by years of service, but also by start dates. So I would hope that, I know we're in a tight budget, but I hope that we would also look at that. I will probably have retired by then, but for the future professionals who are going to serve in that area, I think it's really important that we look at those salaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Just again, to repeat the point after Bobby's point is that, you know, our EPA professionals are an absolutely critical, integral part of our mission. We know that, and we know that to make an impact on many of these issues that we addressed, and particularly student success, we're going to have to pay attention to that. You know, I want to be blunt, though. Number one, we are going into very difficult budgetary times here. We are looking potentially at losing as much as 15% of our budget, which is $80 million. We are going to have to pay a lot of attention to the balance of personnel here at the university as we move forward. And if we are going to be and remain and become a truly extraordinary research-extensive university, that is going to be very, very critical to pay attention to that balance. Yes, EPA non-faculty are critically important. So are our almost 4,000 staff critically important. But the one thing that we're really lagged behind on this university over the last several years is faculty positions, and particularly tenure-track faculty positions. We've only grown our tenure-track faculty positions by a few percent over the last 10 years, despite about a 45% increase in graduate student numbers. So yes, that's an important issue, but we really need to pay attention to how we focus on the balance of our personnel in terms of delivering really, really tightly coordinated services to our students and stakeholders.
I'm Harald Ade. I'm Director of Graduate Programs in Physics. And as such, I'm very familiar with the issues of retention and graduation rates, certainly at the graduate level. What I find there that's most important for us is actually that we do an excellent job at the admissions process. Now, the corollary of that is I also teach introductory physics courses for many years, and in the last couple of years, I've seen a very long tail of students that either were not advised correctly to get into these courses too early or simply should not be on campus. And so if we have very limited resources, one way to fix a number of these problems, including graduation rate, is to make absolutely sure that we have the right students on campus. And just to put this in perspective, the performances, physics hasn't changed for many, many years. And we give multiple choice questions, and the scores went as low as 20% out of 100 on a multiple choice test where I have 5 questions. So they essentially guess and can't get anything right, and I just haven't seen that before, and it greatly concerns me.
Any comments from the graduate student group? No, I'm looking right behind you at the graduate student. Spokesperson, Chancellor.
Thanks. I'm Barb Sherry again. We understand everything you're saying. We think of excellence in graduate education as a cycle. We like to bring in strong students. It's important when they get here that they're in strong programs, that there's excellent faculty mentoring, and together then we can graduate students so that they can be very successful in whatever they choose to do with their degree, and then that will in turn recruit new excellent graduate students to our programs. So it's a cycle. Anywhere we can intervene is a chance for us to make that cycle stronger. We agree that we need to be paying attention to our applicant pools and being careful during our admission process, but what we're hoping is that by intervening here at the stage of the graduate programs, we can attract stronger applicants, and so we can maintain or increase our enrollment, but also increase our quality. So 2 important components that go into that. There are multiple components that go into that, but one very important one is faculty mentoring. So to get back to what Provost Arden was talking about, it's important that we have sufficient high-quality faculty that they can mentor these graduate students through these programs, because that's a very important part of the equation, not just the students that are admitted, but what happens to them once they get here. I'll leave it at that.
If I could just simplify, I hear a lot more discussion on the graduate level about admissions. Maybe I'm out of the loop, but I would like to see the same at the undergraduate level too.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Additional questions or comments for our task force chairs?
Hi, I'm Jessica Jameson from College of Humanities and Social Sciences, Department of Communication. And I noticed in the discussion of success in undergraduate education, the comments on high impact pedagogical practices. And I just want to, again, sort of a reminder to everyone that we used to have on this campus a Center for Excellence in Curricular Engagement, which was a place that could help provide faculty development, connect faculty and community and students to really help us do things like excellent service learning and engaged practices, which feed both our academic mission and our land grant mission. And I think that that's just so important. And I think it's really devastating to our campus that we lost that center. And I hope that as our strategic planning moves forward and we think about things like these high impact pedagogical practices, that we figure out a way to help faculty to be able to use those pedagogies, and that might mean through collaborations with Extension, with some of the EPA professionals around campus, with community members. But when we're being pushed, as we should be, in a research extensive or intensive, sorry, I can never remember which is the correct word anymore, university to publish a lot of research and good sound research, there's only so many hours in a day, as we know. And so I really hope that you'll think about how to make that sustainable and something we can achieve.
Thank you. Any comments from our task force chairs? Okay, what else have we got?
My name is Ellis Coling. I'm a faculty member in Cows and Natural Resources, and one of the things that we've observed in the last several years is the influence that Erskine Bowles has given to asking all 17 of our institutions to embrace the UNC Tomorrow initiative. Erskine Bowles has certainly done an effective job of increasing the efficiency of the UNC system, and that's been, I think, well chronicled. And the UNC Tomorrow initiative has challenged all of the institutions to undertake many of the kinds of things that relate to the needs of the people for educational preparation and research, innovations, and so on. And the 7 goals of the UNC Tomorrow initiative, I think, are splendidly attractive for what our faculty and our staff and our students ought to be aspiring to contribute to. So I wondered if you or Marjorie or any of the task force chairs might illuminate us more fully about how they see, or you see, the UNC Tomorrow initiative that Erskine Bowles, I think, thinks of as one of his major 2 contributions, efficiency and the UNC Tomorrow. Could we speak about what UNC Tomorrow means for North Carolina State University?
You know, Ellis, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say all 7 of them, but I think when you look at the UNC Tomorrow report, there's probably, and I hesitate to say this, but I will, I don't think there's an institution in the state that embodies the principles of that report more than NC State. A part of the report that I think that in terms of what we do for the economy, what we do for the people of North Carolina, the alignment of our programs with the critical economic needs of the state of North Carolina. So I feel extremely good about NC State's delivery against those goals. One aspect of the report that I think we need to pay some attention to and hasn't come up today, but it was one of the task forces, is internationalization and preparing this state and our students to compete in an increasingly complex global economy. And so one of the things that I'm hoping that we get clarity in our vision and clarity in how we invest in this university is how we will internationalize We are a very international campus, you know this, but how we will continue to make our students aware of the global marketplace that they work in. We've heard, we've talked about study abroad, but that's only one aspect of it. How is our research and how is our engagement efforts helping the state and the citizens of North Carolina envision the competitive environment we're all living in? So that's the part. We are, I think, right in the sweet spot, as they say, of UNC Tomorrow's recommendations.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thanks for the question. I think if you look at the tone of this, these task force reports and the strategic plan, you'll see that it's perhaps a little more inwardly focused than other strategic plans, and that's deliberate. And that isn't because we're turning away from the UNC Tomorrow study or the North Carolina State response to the UNC study or our previous strategic plan. It's because we're building on those strengths. You know, I think we've spent a lot of time as an institution looking outward and saying, where are the really important issues that we need to impact on for North Carolina and beyond? And I think we've got a pretty clear vision of what those are and what our impact is to this state. This plan is building on that and is really a little bit more focused in terms of how are we going to go about our business so that we can be most effective in the way we deliver those impacts. And it turns out that we made that decision, you know, 6 or 7 months ago, knowing full well that we were going to have some budgetary challenges. And it is very timely that we targeted the plan in that way. I think to have a grandiose plan that was full of a lot of wish lists that were going to be very difficult to achieve in a challenging budgetary environment might have been very difficult for us at this point in time. But because we're really moving along the pathway of a plan that is focused on how are we going to more effectively do our business, how are we going to graduate students in a more timely fashion with a better experience, how are we going to support our faculty more fully, how are we going to support our staff and create a campus culture which is #1 in the country, how are we going to engage with our partners and stakeholders in a more efficient and more effective manner. I think this is a very timely time for a task force report series and for a strategic plan that has that overtone to it.
Gary Blank in the College of Natural Resources. Thank you, Chancellor, for reminding me of something I wanted to say. Pardon me, I had a little bit of a tickle in my throat. Ellis started the point. You responded in regarding the internationalization of the campus, and I've made this point on other occasions. If our alumni want us to internationalize, if corporations in the landscape of North Carolina want us to internationalize, if we want to internationalize, it's going to take money. And my suggestion is that our development offices in all of our colleges, you, in your efforts, make it a point to get a portion of every endowment donation to go toward the internationalization of this campus. Now, it's hard to use state money for international travel. Up until 1998, I had not been off this continent. As a faculty member in this university, I live in a college where everybody goes everywhere. Very few of us go on state dollars. We go with endowment funds, with research grant monies that we've generated. If we want our students, if we want our graduate students, if we want our faculty to travel, learn, and bring back the information from the world, we need to figure out how to pay for it, and paying for it through endowments, through alumni who give us money to do that is the only way I see it's going to work. I said I hadn't been off this continent until 1998. I've been 16 times off this continent since then. Not one of those trips was paid for with state money. Not one of those trips was paid for with money that the taxpayers of North Carolina gave us. It was through endowments or research allocated funds, and that's the way we got to do it.
I'm looking at my colleagues here from the globalization and task force. So you agree, says Dan.
More money?
Your associate dean says we agree. Other questions? Task force reports? Budget? Anything?
I'm sorry. Who am I? Gary, I agree with Gary. And I have been fortunate to have participated in now, I'm going on my 4th alternative service break with the Center for Student Leadership and Ethics in Public Service to study the issues of world hunger with the director of Stop Hunger now, Mike Giancola, and 14 students, each of whom has had to raise all the money to take themselves on this trip. Now, it's a frugal trip, so for those of you who don't know it, we do it entirely, including airfare, in the last 3 years for less than $1,700, which is very little money if you're spending 1 week in Rome, Italy. So I'm thinking, once again, money for faculty, absolutely. But if what you're building are students, then the study abroad scholarship money, students who would like to go, I don't know if Ingrid's here, but how much money is available in that area to encourage students to study abroad. The service trips, of course, we want the students to be committed to go, so they do raise some money. They raise all their money to go except for the leaders, but yet again, here's another population of individuals who are doing international travel over spring break for service for the university, the benefit of the university, the benefit of the people that they are working with, and then of course for themselves on an international level. So it's another area of international engagement that is based in student activity. Thank you.
So I think when you look through a lot of the priorities of the university, all of us recognize that the priorities we've set for NC State involve the entire campus community. We can't aspire to be a world-class university that seeks to have students that are successful with their education without EPA, SPA, non-tenure track, tenure track. It is, Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village. And when we look at the critical needs of this university to internationalize the experience for our students, to ensure students move throughout the university to be successful and to move from one college to another, we know that this cannot occur without the support of our professional staff, advising staff, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we have got to figure out how to structure this place to be successful in the long haul. And we know that this state has a serious budget crisis, and it has historically supported higher education in a very, very generous way, which has built a university system that's second to none in the country. But it's under tremendous stress right now. And we need to do our part to work through it as a campus community to set our priorities so that we know we're investing our dollars in ways that pay back to the state, pay back to our students, et cetera. And so we're going to work through all of this. And I can guarantee you this is a university that has tremendous assets. In fact, President Ross was here just earlier this week and described us in the strike zone, using a baseball analogy, for the economic needs of the world. And we are. And we are comprehensive, and we do produce an educational environment that our students, the students here are absolutely amazing. And one of the things that's amazing about them is their commitment to service learning that you just pointed out, which is inspired by people like Mike Giancola. an EPA professional for the university. So we're going to do everything we can to get through this. But we're going to have to make some hard decisions. And we will do it in a transparent way, but we don't have a lot of time to prepare ourselves for the coming onslaught or lack thereof of funding. So we've got to work through it in the course of the next few months, and then we'll have a longer implementation phase to make sure that the kind of programs that we're putting in place are reducing. There will be plenty of time to work through those longer term issues. This is not about closing out programs to remove faculty. This is really about keeping this university strong for the future. And we got some great ideas in a strategic plan that a lot of people have worked awfully hard for. And there's some transformative big ideas in there that we'll be pulling together in the final report. And it'll give us a clear roadmap for our investments going forward. You're dying for a question.
Is it that obvious?
Well, I mean, you lined up, man.
My name is Jeff Dalton. I hold a master's degree from this fine university, and I wish it to remain a fine university. In addition, my wife is also a business officer in one of the largest departments on campus, one of the largest in the nation. So we're stakeholders in this process. First, I'd like to associate myself with the comments of Dr. Honeycutt. The Certificate of Accomplishment in Teaching, of which I am an awardee, a certificate holder, is one that I would like to mention, and preparing the professoriate is another program that needs our support. First, concerning input, I want to make sure that the campus community gets all the opportunity for input that it can. And I know we have more time leading up to the decision points, but we need to take online comments, email, mail, in-person smoke signals if we have to make sure that this campus is heard, because nothing would be worse at this critical time than the campus not feeling that their opinions were heard. Second, concerning cutting salaries and positions, anyone who's had any time at this university knows that we need to start at the top and work our way toward the middle. There are many vice chancellors, associate vice chancellors, deans, associate deans that, frankly, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, need to move on. And we need to look at that seriously. And some people in here are too kind to say it. I haven't evolved that far yet. I will say it.
It's a process.
Okay. You can applaud. There's no shame in it. Okay, so that's on the table. And Chancellor, I'm taking a wait-and-see approach on you. I've been that way from the beginning. I'm still there, but seriously, I wish you luck, and I wish all of us luck in this difficult time.
There were some folks taking a wait-and-see, but they're, well, never mind.
Chancellor, I'm taking a see and wait approach to you. Let me follow up on my name is Walt Wolfram, and I'm a professor at this fine institution. Let me follow up on the comment about the PhD proposals, which I consider to be part of moving forward. My frustration as one of the authors of it is not with you and your office. You've been very supportive. My frustration is with GA. You know, we welcome the scrutiny. We just can't seem to get their attention. We can't get on the agenda. You know, every month, Dwayne Larrick gets an email from me that says, where are we in terms of the agenda? And he writes back and says, we're waiting for the transition of GA with the Ross administration. We're waiting for changes in their leadership. And so my feeling is, all along we've said we've got to do things and we have to do them in a hurry. I totally concur with the need for scrutiny. How do we urge and encourage GA to give us the kind of scrutiny that we would like to have? Can you help us?
Yeah,
Can
sure
you help
I can.
me?
Of course, Walt. I
Can you help this university? No.
But you just said you've taken a see and wait. I think the provost has accurately portrayed the challenge we have right now. There's a enhanced scrutiny. One of the ideas, and I forget who said it earlier. I couldn't agree more that PhDs have certain value based on the degree program. I mean, that is association with a certain degree program. But I think as an institution, we have an opportunity to think a little differently about how we structure our PhD programs to be more flexible and nimble and responsive to the expertise of our faculty and to the emerging opportunities. It doesn't work in all disciplines, but I think the graduate task force, the faculty excellence task force, it was pointed out in a number of opportunities where we can perhaps structure fields of study to be more nimble. Now, I'm not sure if that applies to sociolinguistics. In fact, I'm sure you're going to tell me it doesn't, because I can count on that one. But I've said this every place I've had a chance. To be a world-class research-intensive university, you need to afford the faculty the opportunity to be deeply engaged in graduate education. And so we're going to keep fighting these battles. But we may have to think differently about how we do it.
Hi, I'm Jamila Simpson from the College of Hams, and one of the committees, it was the Culture and Campus Community Committee. They talked about having a class for students, which basically taught them how to engage with one another. I was looking for Dr. Picard while I'm looking out. How to engage with one another in a civil way, and basically, you know, when you think about diversity issues, and it's not simply having a diverse group of people, but it's them interacting with one another, learning from one another, and being inclusive. And I just hope that not only will we have something like this kind of academic opportunity for our students to learn from one another and engage with one another, but also with staff and faculty as well, because, you know, when I got my position, and I know there's something in the task force about this, you know, the orientation part, I think Dr. Picard spoke to us for maybe an hour about diversity, and that was about it. And you know, we have some opportunities because we have some wonderful faculty here who come and talk about issues of diversity and things like that. But I would just, you know, hope that we are more intentional and engaged on all levels. So not just the student level, but faculty and staff, because, you know, I know we all have room to grow. So just to be a more supportive, inclusive, you know, university.
Anybody from the Campus Culture and Community Task Force want to comment?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Argentati, co-chair of that task force. I just want to say, you know, thanks. I'm glad you read the report, and that those recommendations in our discussion of both representation of diverse groups on our campus in terms of faculty and staff and student composition, and also that authentic interaction where we really have meaningful dialogue, that those points came through, and that you also agree that they're valuable. So we would love to hear more, you know, from the email as we move forward. But I think we did hear from a lot of staff and faculty and students throughout the university who really reaffirmed the value of diversity, also in terms of how staff and employees are managed in their units too, and that it ties into a whole bunch of things, making NC State a best place to live, work, and learn as well. That's in our report. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Hi, my name is Christine Grant, and I'm a professor in chemical and biomolecular engineering, and I'm also an associate dean in the College of Engineering. And so I'm going to show my, maybe I missed something, but because I've missed things before that don't get on my calendar, and this was one of them today. So I don't know if there was, and I was on one of the task force, so I don't know if I missed a memo that came out or not. But anyway, what I wanted to say was that I was under the impression that we were actually going to hear reports from the task forces today. And I was reluctant to get up because I didn't want to, you know, say something that was controversial, but that's not anything I ever do, as you know. But I was talking to some of the people around me, and they seemed to think that that was maybe going to be the format. And so I guess what that challenges me to do is to go back and read the report, but there may be some other people in the room that were kind of under the same impression. I see some people shaking their heads. So I just, yeah, a lot of people shaking their heads. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because while I think this was a very good opportunity to have these questions, I would have challenged myself to read the reports before I came here, thinking that I was going to get a summary, and there might be another opportunity to actually make me go back and read the report and then kind of do something like this again. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and my people around me, I did it, okay?
Thanks, Christine. Appreciate those comments. You know, the problem with doing task force reports in a sort of a 1-hour forum is that we have 9 task forces, and trying to get through 9 task force reports or even brief summaries of 9 task force reports in an hour, let alone leave time for some input, is extraordinarily challenging. We had some sessions in late December where we did have the task forces report out to the combined strategic planning committee, and to get through 9 task force reports took us 5 hours. So what we really wanted to do, seeing we had a limited amount of time today, was to get the task force reports out at the beginning of the week, give you the opportunity to look at them, and use this most importantly as a forum to take comment and input to inform us in the process as we move forward, versus simply standing up and getting 9 task force reports together. So if you haven't had a chance to read those reports or read them in depth, I really encourage you to do that. As I've said at the beginning, this isn't a one-shot deal in terms of taking input. We want your input as we walk through this process. Please give it to us either via the strategic planning website, in emails directly to Marjorie, to myself, to Karen Helm. This is really a critically important time, this next 4 or 5 weeks especially, as we try and extract the central and core elements out of those task force reports and build our overarching strategic plan. So on that, we're going to close out. We really appreciate you being here today, and thank you for your questions and comments. Marjorie, did you have anything to close?
Just an encouraging note on reading those reports, because I think the committees did a great job and spent a lot of time. They are in length from 3 pages, we can all do that, to 47, I think, so that one might be a little more challenging. But if you read them in some entirety, you will begin to see themes across and some gelling of ideas, and in spite of what we're facing, I think some enthusiasm for changing in very, very positive ways. So go back and read them and send us your comments. Thank you.